So I would really love to know more about what does happiness really mean to you, and when do you see yourself being most happy?
That's a very loaded question, and one that I think we often don't actually sit down to think about, right? We just kind of go along with life, and it takes someone like you to make us pause and actually think about something like this. It's funny. I have a 10-year-old daughter, as you know, Dia, and I think the most sort of unadulterated version of happiness is something that I see in her, which is largely due to not yet being uh, influenced as much by what's happening around. Maybe, whether it's society, whether it's her classmates, whether it's really this raw um, uh, reaction to something that makes you feel good or doesn't, and genuinely makes you feel happy or not. And I think as we sort of uh, get older and more sort of exposed to the real world, there's a lot of things that start influencing that version of happiness and driving what makes you feel happy. And
A big welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us on this podcast series called Happiness Hour. And this series is all about exploring, what does happiness mean to you? And here I am to take you on this journey of exploring and discovering your own happiness. Today with me, I have Gauri Devidayal. That doesn't need much of an introduction. Nevertheless, a lawyer, a chartered accountant, and then more known as a restaurateur, an entrepreneur. I got to know Gauri years about more than a decade ago when she was still with PricewaterhouseCoopers and hadn't and was just on the cusp of embarking on this journey as a restaurateur. And getting to know an amazing person who has changed her life and changed the whole definition of F&B in a very big way. Started young with her husband Jay with the restaurant The Table, and has moved on to just moving from one cuisine to the next, and cafes. And as I speak to her, she's on yet to just about getting ready to open the next cafe. I shall keep mum on that and leave her to talk about it. So welcome, Gauri, and thank you for being with us today.
thank you so much for that warm introduction, and great to be here as always, Ashu.
So I'm going to, really start with um, this conversation with what is happiness, the most basic, but yet the widest question. The world revolves around the search for happiness. Everything that we do ultimately is about wanting to be happy. And somewhere I feel we forget that we started this journey to be happy. And we get caught up in wanting to be successful and many other things along with it. So I would really love to know more about what does happiness really mean to you, and when do you see yourself being most happy?
That's a very loaded question, and one that I think we often don't actually sit down to think about, right? We just kind of go along with life, and it takes someone like you to make us pause and actually think about something like this. It's funny. I have a 10-year-old daughter, as you know, Dia, and I think the most sort of unadulterated version of happiness is something that I see in her, which is largely due to not yet being influenced as much by what's happening around. Maybe, whether it's society, whether it's her classmates, whether it's really this raw um, uh, reaction to something that makes you feel good or doesn't, and genuinely makes you feel happy or not. And I think as we sort of uh, get older and more sort of exposed to the real world, there's a lot of things that start influencing that version of happiness and driving what makes you feel happy. And I think rather than knowing or having that answer of what makes me happy, truly. I know that what makes me unhappy is, when I start comparing myself to other people, or at least, maybe that I used to do that a lot more. And now I'm being more sort of conscious and aware of driving my own path in a way, or paving my own path the way I want to, at the pace that I want to. But it took a lot of stumbling, I guess, along the way to realize that what I was doing or my decision making may have been driven by factors other than what I really wanted. And it took a lot of sort of self awareness and questioning myself before I realized that. And I can think of a number of instances where I've had to kind of course correct to be driven more by what is important to me than other people around me.
Yeah, it is indeed a very challenging journey. And, turning inwards and being true to oneself is, I think, the highest challenge given to us, to mankind. I too found that what drove me inwards was looking back in time and seeing my children and looking at I was happy when,
Mm.
and then discovering how I got entangled in this whole concept of comparisons, competition, and really messed my head up. It is a challenge. And how do you find yourself sometimes? We do grapple with wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be recognized, wanting to be seen by the world. And when we start living true to ourselves rather than comparing or competing, do you find a struggle in that?
I think you can, I think that both things can coexist. I think it's about, um, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard. But I think if you have something valuable to contribute to the world, it will happen. So I think it's really about what the outcome might be, that you are seen by the world, or you are, you become popular or known or famous. But I think what starts becoming a challenge is when that becomes the purpose as opposed to the outcome. So a lot of times, even, you mentioned about how I started my career in a very different direction and ended up as a restaurateur. I had no idea what to expect as a restaurateur and how my life would sort of change as a result, or how it would evolve rather as a result of being a restaurateur. And one of the things that I've obviously known, to happen now is that it's a very sort of public uh, role in a way, or a profession, I guess, a career. And, so you are known to people, like you said in the introduction as well, that, what I'm probably more known for now is my work as a restaurateur. But I didn't know that going into this business, right? This was whatever, 13, 14 years ago. And I had no idea that this is how things would play out. And I think that's the important thing, is that when you do something with that goal in mind, it changes a lot of the decision making that you do along the way. Whereas if you uh, decide that you're going to, work on creating a great restaurant, and that's, what you're going to focus your energies on, and one of the sort of byproducts of that is that you become known, or, you become sort of popular, the face of the brand, or whatever it is. I think that's where that there's a fundamental difference. I always sort of say this to people who ask me, what advice would you give to someone who wants to open a restaurant? And I always say that, one of the things is that people see it as a very glamorous career or profession. And that's not the reason to get into it. The glamour might come as an outcome, because then you're sort of almost setting yourself up for unhappiness in a way. If you're driven by the sort of a different agenda from what it should be.
And the journey, often this whole journey as an entrepreneur and everything, takes us through a lot of understanding ourselves, the journey into authenticity, the journey into really knowing our purpose and discovering that the outcome is, yes, there's nothing wrong in working towards an outcome, but as you very spot on said, getting attached to that outcome and making it your vision is where the problem arises. That's where we get muddled up. That's where we get unhappy. And that's where we lose our way.
And I think one of you mentioned the word purpose. Happiness is often tied to that, right? That when you know your purpose or when you have a purpose is what drives happiness. And it's very easy to say, know your purpose, but it's actually one of the hardest things to um, figure out. And often, like you said, it happens as a process of elimination before you move towards positively actually identifying what your purpose is. I don't know if I've sort of realized or, I know what it is yet, but I know that I'm getting closer to what I think it might be, maybe compared to 10 years ago.
No, no, brilliant. But I've seen life is so full of twists, turns, and surprises. Every time I think I know, there's another singer that comes in my way and totally makes me pivot. Uh, just moving on, when being a successful restaurateur, you're a mom as well. You talked about Dia, and you have various responsibilities. You're a podcaster. There's a team you have at the back. You, of course, have Jay. How do you balance everything with, and the food industry, the restaurant industry is, I think, from whatever I saw in those 6 months, I think every day there's a real fire, figuratively and metamorphically. You're dealing with fires all the time, especially with staff that can be quite volatile at times.
Yeah,
How do you keep your cool and balance it all? Or do you
there's
manage
people
to?
ask me what's a typical day for like for you, and I'm like, there's no such thing in our business. All the things I set out to do at the beginning of the day, I mean, I'd be happy if I get half of that done, because it's literally more about firefighting than anything else. uh Again, this word balance, I think learned to accept that it's it I don't know what balance necessarily is, but I think I heard someone say this and it really resonated with me. It's more about harmony, right? That these things can coexist in different proportions at different times, and that it's more about finding that that coexist that sort of ability to give importance to different things at different times of the day, of the week, of the year, whatever it is, right? Depending on, and that ability to recognize what needs more attention right now is, I think, the best way that you can, navigate this space of being a mother, an entrepreneur, wife, etc. And I think the earlier that you realize that you can't make everyone equally happy all the time, and but you use your best judgment to do your best, and have the best intention, I think it works out. The people around you recognize the effort, if not the outcome. And as you sort of get older, and with more experience, I think you get better at it. And I always tell people around me that don't feel guilty about using all the resources and tools at your disposal to help you achieve that harmony, because you can't do everything and you can't do everything perfectly. And the more you sort of, the longer you take to realize that, the more unhappy you will be, honestly. So it's something that I sort of, I was talking about how doing things on my terms was a discovery process for me. And one of them was when I became a mother, where there was this expectation of me to, be home at a certain time when my daughter came home from school, or that, could I just not work part-time instead for a little while till, she was of a certain age and things. And I just realized that that didn't make me happy, and I probably then wouldn't have made her happy either if I was unhappy. Um and I kind of needed to take responsibility for how I was going to bring her up, and then live with that, uh then take full responsibility for my decisions. And the minute I did that and I stopped trying to kind of do the right thing by other people, I was so much happier. I was so much more effective as a person. And that was a real turning point for me as a parent. I distinctly remember that time in my life when that happened. And it just changed so much for me, uh, in terms of my approach to being a parent and an entrepreneur and a wife. Um, and that's the sort of mantra in a way that I've lived by, that you do what you think is right at the time, and then take responsibility for whatever that outcome is, and then keep, you know, learning from it, I guess.
Yeah, so you've said, many things in, as we some very important points you made. One is that coexistence is something we have to be clear on. The second is harmony in that coexistence. Thirdly, how much it is about owning your decisions and doing the right thing. And to do that, one has to let go of this whole concept of perfection. So, and of course, now, there are consequences that come with all of that. Now, what I really want to ask you is, often one gets, because end of the day, we live in a society, we live in a social structure where you're getting bombarded with, as you were saying, what's the right thing to do, whether as a parent or this or that. How do you really filter or keep yourself anchored when you're getting either bombarded with, and how does your daughter or your family also, how do you deal with it truly, like keeping that harmony?
So it's definitely a struggle at first. And I think, that you get this advice from all directions. Um, what you realize very quickly is that if you follow this advice blindly and may or may not believe in it or have thought it through, and then things don't play out the way they're supposed to, you can't then go and blame someone else. So what's the point of doing it and then, following other people's and also what works for someone else is very much driven by their lifestyle and their environment and their circumstances, which doesn't necessarily, map onto yours in exactly the same way. So it's very easy for someone to say things from their perspective without a complete understanding of your situation. My sort of response could be one of, these two three things. It could be that either I say, okay, she's expecting this, I have to go and do it, or it could be that I sit down and explain it to her and, let her see my point of view and how someone's sort of mom could be in a different situation and therefore able to do what she does, and I, have to do things the way I'm doing them. And the third is to maybe find a halfway house and say, like, okay, I hear you, and I'll make more of an effort this way, but also, uh, understand what is going on in my world and share a bit more of that. And that's the kind of thing that I feel, that sort of open line of communication, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your child, with your parents, whoever, uh,
And I
is
guess even your team at work.
exactly with the team at work
Yeah.
as well. Like, have an open line of communication where in doing so, you may actually even change certain thought processes that you had. But it's just important to have that like honest dialogue and and go with the flow in a way.
But with that comes, a lot of facing up to oneself and letting go of a lot of beliefs, letting go of wanting to be in control, letting go of outcomes. And there are just so much of letting go which people grapple with the most, because everybody, the instinct is to want to be in control of how others feel and think about you, control of your work, control of outcomes. It's all about so much about control. And I think what threw people off at the most at COVID was the fear of unknown and feeling so out of control. uh, how do you manage that? Because you, of course, have a life of not being in control most of the time.
100%. Absolutely. And this is again been a journey for me. I remember that when we first opened the restaurant, because it was such a sort of, uh, project that was personal to me, where we really like put all of ourselves into it. And the minute something didn't play out the way it should, or there was a negative sort of or critical feedback, or whatever, sort of something that didn't go like it should have, it used to eat me up. It took me days, nights to get over the fact that things didn't go to plan. I think one of the reasons that I took the route of reading law at university and then becoming a chartered accountant was like I needed everything was logical, structured. There was a with accounting there was a right and a wrong answer most of the time, and that's how my brain worked. And then when I came into the world of entrepreneurship, and of course being a mother and all the things that followed, I was very quickly made aware of the fact that things will not go to plan. You do not have control. And yes, things will go wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a human centric business, and there's no way of controlling everything. But it did, even though it sounds it sounds logical, it took me a while to actually accept it and embrace that into my way of thinking. And I think I've come a long way in realizing that you have to just address each situation as it comes, and you get better at that with experience, of course. I feel happier for it. I feel lighter for it. Not having this, whether it's self-imposed or not, but not having this burden and this pressure on my head that I have to like achieve this by this age, or have to do. I think when you kind of also let go of those self-imposed burdens, or pressures.
You talked about two very fundamental things, agility and self-care. Now, that kind of a mindset requires a lot of discipline and certain practices. I think it's one thing learning from experience, it's another thing disciplining the mind to not keep becoming hostage to or victim to those thoughts of guilt, regret, and all kinds of things that gnaw at us.
Mhm.
To becoming that sacrificer lamb again and again, and to recognize that I too deserve to be happy.
So one of the things is I do my morning workout, whether it's yoga or I go for my class. That's an hour for myself, where much as I'd love to just like spend an extra hour in bed and chill out and spend time with Jay, in the morning, I have that thing of that's I'm going to go for that. And I remember at one point there was a class that I used to do where it meant that I left home a little earlier than Dia would leave for school. Whenever I sort of did that sort of hour diligently, I was like, it's only going to be better for everybody else if I'm in a happy place and I'm, sort of all riled up and ready to get to work. So, or whatever was coming up after that. So, that's one thing that I've been sort of conscious of because I've seen the benefit of it. And the other times, honestly, a lot of times I have to remind myself that it's okay to do it. And that thing that you just said about this self-care and having certain things that you do as a maybe not routine, but that you do consciously to look after yourself. Sometimes you don't do it consciously and you forget, and then you hit a sort of point of either you're like burnt out or you're just feeling exhausted, whatever, and then you start thinking about yourself to take care of yourself. So I think we have to be a little more mindful of doing things as a matter of course rather than when you hit a low point.
Gauri, you've seen, and even you as a podcaster or someone who uses social media, Instagram, everything very much, because that's the way the world is today. Even WhatsApp, or being constantly the need to be in touch, the need to be out there to get the photographs right, all of that, the whole building an image versus the reality behind it. What would you really say about that?
I'm fully someone who's been a been through that myself, knowingly, unknowingly, whatever, gotten caught up in that. And I, I'll be completely honest, at one point, it's almost like you you don't need that social engagement because you get that entertainment, or you get that sort of uh, through social media, right? So it was something that it was like a bit of a when I realized that, I sort of instantly, try to temper the amount of time I spend on my phone. And it's very easy for us to say, use the work, doing work on our phone as an excuse for being on it more than we need to. And I think, when it comes to spending time on your phone, I think the only way is that you need a lot of self-discipline to switch off, because otherwise you can be on it, all your waking hours.
Because I used to just earlier say whatever I felt like till I realized that is it really adding value?
Exactly.
What am I saying it for? Am I trying to be righteous? Am I trying to prove something? And there are just so many little insights and turning points one has to coming to where experience life teaches you. It gives you a few whacks, it gives you a few validations, and it shapes you, molds you, and continues to do that. And it's a great, it's a constant learning because events keep changing, experiences keep new ones keep coming, to keep coming back to what is it that works for me and makes me happy. And as you said, there's no right and wrong.
Yeah, and also, like, even if you do sometimes digress from that, it's okay, as long as you come back, you sort of course correct, because and don't beat yourself up about it.
Big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one. As we come to the close of our conversation, I'd just like to ask you, is there something that you'd like to say to the young entrepreneurs or people who are wanting to embark on this journey, and even our listeners, which is really, I'm looking, happiness is something everybody seeks and thinks it's an elusive goal, but it is very possible. So what would you like to leave our listeners with?
This is not, like you said, this is not for entrepreneurs versus everybody else. I think this is for everyone. And this is something that I learned, through one of my most difficult times at work. But I think often what we perceive others, perception of us is usually far from that. And we need to stop worrying about what other people think about us and really focus on why we're doing what we're doing and get better at it every day, and just focus on getting better at it every day and not worry about what anyone else thinks about us, because life will throw googlies at you all the time, whether at work or in your personal life, at home, wherever. And you're not the only one having those googlies thrown at you. Everyone is. And so don't get caught up in what everyone else is sort of thinking about your life, because they're probably not thinking about your life.
Yeah, they're so busy living their own. Yeah, it's ultimately about really checking in with oneself and just constantly working on oneself and with oneself. That's really it. So, thank you so much, Gauri, on sharing your perspectives on happiness, what makes you happy, how you practice it into your daily life, and how you ultimately focus on, am I living true to myself and am I growing every day? Am I really growing from there? So, thank you once again for coming and being a guest on our podcast, The Happiness Hour. And thank you to all the listeners for being with us today.
Thank you for having me and for listening.